All is well, and he should be back in 5 minutes. The number
that teach about a dead God, like a Hindu or Buddha. They just preach about a dead God. But our God's alive. Our God is the only one who has conquered death. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was crucified, dead, but then he rose again. He defeated Satan so that we might have life eternal. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
This story is just for people who enjoy it. An old romantic story, Cecilia. Would you like a nice romantic story?
I would love a romantic story.
Well, 1972 was the darkest year of the Troubles here. The death and destruction made news around the world. And 3,500 miles away, a young woman who'd recently found a faith in Christianity was reading about it, and in an attempt to, as she describes it, spread God's love, the 18-year-old decided to board a plane and come to Belfast. But little did she know she would be the one to find love, because a few days after arriving and across the barricades in Cornmarket in the city centre, the young woman caught eyes with a local lad. 3 weeks later they got engaged, and 50 years on they returned to Belfast to visit Cornmarket and remember that day. It's a great story. Syd and Liz Doyle, they shared it yesterday before the programme at Declan and Mark. On a day of breaking news we couldn't get to it, but we're going to do it now. It was a chance encounter that changed their lives, but Liz begins by recalling her first impressions of Northern Ireland.
Well, it was dark in the sense of, even the weather was dark. And when I got off, we actually drove up through the Falls Road in that region and on my way over to Newtonards, and just to look at the situation. And it was barbed wire. It was buildings shuttered up. It was blown up buildings. It was soldiers everywhere. There were, those, I don't know if they're called like tanks, driving through the armored cars through the roads. There were soldiers on patrol. It was frightening, really. It was a place that was a war zone.
Nonetheless, you got your guitar and headed for Cornmarket in the centre of the city. You come across as a pretty gutsy 18-year-old, Liz.
Yes, I certainly was, and I did. I had never even been on a bus in my life, and I just figured out how to use, the double-decker bus, and so I took my 10P, I believe it was, and my guitar, and I climbed on the bus and just drove down Newtonards Road into the city, and it was grim. It was very grim, and soldiers were everywhere. Like I said, there weren't a lot of people, and I didn't know what to do, but I got to the checkpoint. After they searched me and all, I asked a policeman, "Where would you go if you were me? I want to go and sing and preach." And he just sort of smiled at me and said, "Well, there's a bombed out area called the Cornmarket." And he explained to me how to get there, and I just stood there. Even as today, you have the shape of the buildings and everything was what it looked like, except that it was deserted, basically. So it was pretty desolate.
And then in the midst of all this, you begin to sing and begin to preach. And across Cornmarket, a young man catches your eye. Describe what you saw.
Well, in front of me were, by that time, there was probably 30, 40 people who'd come out of the shops and were listening. They were interested because I had an American accent, and I was singing, and it was unique. And so as I began to sing, I saw him come up one of the streets. He just caught my eye, and I felt the Lord say to me, "You're going to marry that man."
What?
Yep. And I said,
what did that feel like? Be more specific, Liz. What did it feel like?
it was like, well, I'll tell you how the Lord speaks to me. He speaks to me through my conscience, okay? So it's just like a voice in my head says, you're going to marry that man. And I looked at it and I thought, well, he's really good looking. And then he left not long after that. And I thought that was my imagination, And, but it was important that happened, because when he did come back to speak to me, I would never have gone with a strange man anywhere during those days, ever. But because he came up and I'd seen him and I felt that this was God's will for me, I just went with him for a coffee. And that started our relationship, which is now 51 years old.
Yeah.
And as you ended up in that most romantic of places with Syd, Randallstown.
Yes, in Randallstown. And we were there. There was a tent meeting that was happening there. And so he came to Randallstown, and then he followed me to Kells, and he followed me to Castle Dawson. Yeah. He followed me everywhere. And
so much for playing it cool, Syd.
That's right.
He didn't have much time, so he knew I was going to go back to America, so he wanted to make sure. And I knew that I would marry him, but I didn't want to seem too eager. So I just kept saying, I'll pray about it. Let me think about it.
You refused at Randallstown as well.
Well, I didn't refuse.
Well,
I just said...
You stalled it.
I stalled.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, just to be clear, how long was it between that first meeting in Cornmarket and you accepting his proposal?
About 3 weeks.
Wow.
And Syd, was it love at first sight for you?
No, it wasn't. I wasn't really interested in any of that, and I didn't. That would have scared me if I had heard what she just said at that time. So I had just come around the corner and I'd heard the singing, and I thought that's live music, because I used to come up to Smithfield and listen to records and music all around the shops. And I thought that's live. And then I heard her speaking. I thought, she's American. She must be live. So as I came around the corner, that's when I saw her in the crowd of people. And I thought, why is she here? That was the first thing, So I thought, yeah, okay, as I said in the newspaper, she's a bit nutty, but she's American, so that explains it. And, she didn't know any danger, as it were.
Syd, is it right to say that your first official date was on July 21st that year, which lives in infamy as Bloody Friday now? What do you remember of that day?
Okay, well, my sister's a nurse up there, and her flat was in Donegal Road, and we were up there. We saw this whole thing happening. Balls of smoke flying into the air, the explosions, and we'd been in her house before. I'd been in the house before when there was some shooting outside, but this was totally different. We could just have a landscape of the bombs going off, the explosion. We thought, what is this? So that was scary. Now, she wasn't with me at that time.
Yes, what happened was we had met in Belfast. So he'd come into town he lived in Crumlin, and I had come in from Newtownards.
On a Saturday.
And it was a Saturday, and we had walked through the town, or the Friday, and we had walked through the town and done some shopping. So, we probably walked by some of the places where the bombs were planted. But as we walked by, then we had made arrangements to go see his sister up where she was in the Royal Victoria Hospital. So we went up there, and from where she was there, all of a sudden we were talking to her, and you could just hear boom. And so we got up, and we just watched all of these bombs go off all around Belfast. And, it was like, it was surreal.
Road,
was it Donegal Road?
Yeah,
well, we were up on the hill looking down, and it was like surreal, like what on earth has happened?
Fast forward 50 years, you've been back in Belfast. What do you think of the city now?
It's really nice. I mean, it kind of brings tears to my eyes when I think of it, at what it was like back then, and comparing it, because it's lots of colour, lots of shops. People are just walking around carefree, lots of shopping, and, it's just like business is booming, fantastic restaurants as well.
Can I ask from your perspective, Liz, and I'm asking this to to you, Liz, as the outsider, as it were. As somebody who is as devoutly Christian as you are, how have you reconciled that with your understanding of the sectarian nature of the divide here?
Well, the way I look at it and the way that I approached it when I came is that for me, my faith isn't about a religion. It's about having a relationship with Christ and living for Him and obeying Him. And in that means forgiveness and love and caring for others and helping others. It doesn't mean fighting and taking sides like that.
So have you found it hard to reconcile when the divide here is described, and it's described in a number of ways, but when it's described as Catholics v Protestants or vice versa, does that make sense to you and your faith?
It makes sense from the point of view as if you're religious and you're institutionalized religion, but it does not make sense in what true Christianity is all about at all. It has nothing to do with what Jesus taught or lived or tells us to live.
Just finally, 50 years on, you retraced your footsteps, you went back to Cornmarket. Am I allowed to ask this before the watershed? Did you have a wee kiss at Cornmarket when you got back there?
We had a couple of big kisses.
Hey!
Fair play, you Syd. Not tiptoeing around this, absolutely. Yeah.
They were one name and Kevin the cameraman. Yeah, they were egging us on. They really. So
well, I've seen the picture,
it.
Syd, and it didn't look like you took much encouragement.
No, it was the same 50 years ago, chasing around the country, Syd. You've been outed. You did all the running, isn't that right, Liz?
That's right. He did all the running.
And I was thumbing lifts. I had to get from Crumlin. I had no car or anything. I had a bus to get into Belfast that day.
He was desperate, and that's good because it takes desperation to stay married for 50 years.
She was too young, though. It was too late.
That's the note to end on right there. Liz, Syd, listen, congratulations to you both. Yes. Thank you so much. What a lovely story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yes, Syd and Liz Doyle back in Belfast after 50 years, speaking history to Mark and Declan.